My sister called me crying, saying, "Mom took everything and kicked me out." I thought it was a joke until I drove home and saw the locks changed, the house empty, and a note that made my blood run cold. "I can't believe this is happening," my sister whispered, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. "Mom, she took everything. She changed the locks. She kicked me out." I froze in the car, heart hammering. My own mother, the woman who raised us, had just turned our childhood home into a trap. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Everything gone. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or call the cops first. When I finally stepped inside, the scene was worse than I imagined. Empty shelves, stripped furniture, and a single note on the counter. It said, "You get what you deserve." I realized, in that moment, my family would never be the same. When I stepped through the front door, the emptiness hit me like a punch to the chest. Our family home, walls lined with pictures of birthdays, graduations, vacations, was stripped bare. My mom's handwriting scrawled across a single note on the kitchen counter, jagged and almost mocking, "You get what you deserve." I sank into a chair, stunned, unable to process what had just happened. My sister, Emily, collapsed beside me, shaking. "I don't understand," she whispered. She said I wasn't responsible enough, that I needed to learn. But kicking me out? She didn't even warn me. I tried to calm her down, but my own anger was bubbling beneath the surface. Mom had always been controlling, little comments, constant judgment, but this was a whole new level. This was deliberate, surgical, and cruel. I could still smell the faint scent of lavender from the candles she used to light every Sunday evening, the smell now haunting in its absence. I called my neighbor first, trying to get some insight. Mrs. Jensen had lived next door for 20 years and knew my mom almost as well as we did. "Mrs. Jensen, did you see anything?" I asked, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. "Oh, honey. Yes, I saw her leaving early this morning," she said carefully. "She had a moving truck." "I thought she was helping you pack. Didn't realize she was clearing the house herself." My stomach sank. Mom had orchestrated this entire eviction. She hadn't just taken Emily's things. She had taken control of every corner of the house. I could feel my jaw tighten. "Why would she do this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Control. Always control. Emily started gathering what little she could salvage. Her textbooks, a few clothes, her laptop. She looked at me, tear-streaked and trembling. "Where am I supposed to go?" she whispered. I had no answer, and I hated that. I hated that Mom had put us in this position. The first night was the worst. Emily crashed on the couch at a friend's apartment, while I stayed in the empty house to make sure nothing else disappeared. Every sound, the creak of a floorboard, the hum of the refrigerator, felt amplified in the silence. I kept thinking I would find her waiting to justify herself, or worse, laughing at us from some distant corner. But the house remained empty, cold, and accusing. By morning, I realized we needed a plan. Mom was relentless. She wouldn't relent just because we were shocked. Emily couldn't go back home, and I couldn't let her wander from place to place. So I called our Aunt Linda, the one family member Mom had never fully controlled. Linda was furious when she heard the story. "That's illegal," she said. "She can't just throw someone out like that. We need to document everything, take pictures, make a list of what's missing, and call the authorities if we have to." We spent the next few hours photographing the house, cataloging what was gone, and making sure Emily had temporary housing. Every item missing was a punch to the gut. Her favorite chair, the desk she spent hours studying at, even the small bookshelf she built herself. Each absence told a story of calculated cruelty, and every time I looked at Emily, her eyes full of betrayal, I felt my own rage building. By that afternoon, Mom started calling. At first, she tried to sound casual. "I thought this would help her grow," she said. "She needs responsibility. You know I'm just trying to guide her." I almost laughed. Guide? Clear out her room without warning, seize control of her. Life and then call it guidance? My fingers hovered over the phone, my blood boiling. I kept the call short, knowing any conversation would only fuel her manipulations. The next day, Emily received an email that shook her further, a notice of abandoned property. Mom had apparently sent it to our local authorities, claiming Emily had left voluntarily and forfeited her belongings. I stared at the email, stunned. This wasn't just family drama. It was a legal maneuver, and it meant we were running out of options fast. I contacted a lawyer friend, Mark, and explained the situation. He sighed heavily. "They don't see it like personal betrayal," he said. "Legally, you need evidence that she evicted her without proper notice or justification. And honestly, if she's savvy, she might try to claim the house itself, or at least put a lien on the property." It was like a nightmare spiraling into more nightmares. I looked at Emily, who was now crying silently in the corner, and felt a wave of helplessness. But I also felt a flicker of resolve. We couldn't let Mom win. Not like this. Not after everything we'd endured. We started planning our counter-strategy. I spoke with the landlord landlord, explained the situation and ensured that Emily had temporary accommodations that were legally recognized. Linda helped us gather documentation, emails, texts, and photos showing Mom's actions. Every piece of evidence was a small victory in an uphill battle. By nightfall, Emily was calmer, curled up under a blanket on a friend's couch. "I hate her," she muttered. I nodded, understanding completely. But beneath the hatred, I also felt a strange pride. Emily hadn't crumbled. She hadn't let Mom break her completely. And that, I realized, was the first real win of the battle. The following morning, Mom escalated. She showed up at the house with a moving company claiming she was removing hazards and cleaning up abandoned property. I called the police immediately, knowing that any confrontation could get ugly. The officers arrived, asked questions, and quickly realized that Emily had legal standing. Mom's attempt at intimidation crumbled in minutes. For the first time in decades, Mom didn't have control. Watching her argue with the police, flustered and desperate, was surreal. She had thought she could steamroll us, manipulate us with her charm and authority, but reality had caught up to her. Emily finally began to breathe easier, and I allowed myself to feel a rare moment of relief. But the saga wasn't over. Mom's calls, emails, and passive-aggressive messages continued for weeks. She tried to lure Emily back with promises, guilt trips, and twisted logic. Each time we held firm. Each time, our evidence and preparation shielded us from her manipulations. By the end of the first month, Emily had secured her own apartment, fully stocked, with a sense of independence she had never truly felt before. Mom's attempts to disrupt her life were thwarted at every turn, and I realized for the first time in years that we had reclaimed power over our own lives, our own home, and our own choices. Mom didn't take our resistance quietly. A few days after Emily moved into her new apartment, I started receiving frantic messages from her, alternating between fake concern and thinly veiled threats. "You're tearing this family apart," one read. Another, "Think about your sister, what are you doing to her?" I blocked her number, but she pivoted quickly to email, text, and even social media messages. Every platform became her battlefield. Emily, exhausted and tense, began documenting every message and call. We started keeping a shared folder with timestamps, screenshots, and notes. "We're not just fighting for the furniture," she said quietly one night. "We're fighting for our dignity." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. This wasn't about sofas or chairs. It was about reclaiming our lives from someone who had always demanded control. Then came the day Mom tried to manipulate the system. She showed up at Emily's new apartment claiming she had right of entry because of her familial relationship and threatened to involve the authorities if Emily didn't let her in. Emily stayed calm and called the police. The officer, a stern woman who clearly didn't have time for manipulation, listened patiently. "Ma'am, you have no legal claim here," she said, looking Mom directly in the eye. Mom sputtered, her arguments falling apart like a house of cards. Watching Mom flounder, Emily whispered to me, "I can't believe I'm finally standing up to her." And that moment, more than any legal document or police intervention, felt like the true victory. Emily's spine, so long bent under Mom's control, was finally straight. But of course, Mom didn't give up. She enlisted allies, friends, distant relatives, anyone who might side with her. Letters started arriving in the mail, emails flooded our inboxes, and even neighbors called, influenced by Mom's half-truths. Each time Emily and I tackled them together, presenting facts calmly, documenting everything, and refusing to be intimidated. The emotional toll was exhausting. Emily would sometimes wake me in the middle of the night, terrified after a dream about Mom breaking in or taking more. I sat with her, listening to her fears, reminding her that the house she was in now was safe, that we were prepared, and that Mom's power was finally limited. Slowly, her panic lessened, replaced by a cautious confidence. One afternoon, a letter arrived from a lawyer Mom had retained, claiming compensation for emotional damages. Due to Emily's defiance, I stared at the paper in disbelief. Emotional damages? From a person who had orchestrated the eviction without warning? The absurdity of it almost made me laugh, if the tension in my chest wasn't so heavy. I forwarded the letter to Mark, our lawyer friend. He shook his head. "She's grasping at straws," he said. "This isn't just emotional manipulation. It's legally baseless, but she's trying to make you afraid. That's all this is." I read the letter again. Fear was exactly what she wanted. I refused to give it to her. Mom escalated even further. She appeared outside Emily's apartment one morning, pacing in the hallway with a camera, recording what she called evidence of emotional neglect. Emily and I stayed inside, refusing to engage, and notified the police. Officers came quickly, ensuring Mom left and warning her against harassment. That day, for the first time, I realized that boundaries, firm, unyielding boundaries, were more powerful than anything else. Then came the most surreal moment. Mom tried to manipulate social media. She posted on Facebook, Instagram, and even neighborhood forums, spinning stories about Emily being irresponsible, selfish, and ungrateful. Her friends began commenting, questioning, and even judging us. It was exhausting, but we stayed consistent. Every post, every comment, every interaction was met with calm truth, documented for possible legal reference. One night, Emily received a frantic voicemail from Mom's sister, Aunt Carol. "You need to forgive her," she said. "She's your mother. You're breaking her heart." Emily played it back to me, voice trembling. I listened carefully and said, "She's trying to guilt you, Emily. That's all. None of this is your fault." Emily nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. I feel like I'm losing the family I thought I had," she admitted. And that's when I realized the true cost of Mom's control. It wasn't just material, it was emotional. A lifetime of manipulation boiled into weeks of chaos. We started therapy sessions together, focusing on boundaries, healing, and reclaiming autonomy. Each session was painful but liberating. Emily began to articulate feelings she had buried for years: anger, fear, resentment, and I listened, sometimes holding back my own tears. It was a catharsis we had both been denied for so long. Meanwhile, Mom's attempts to regain control continued, but they were increasingly transparent and ineffective. She tried to pressure friends to intervene, spread rumors to neighbors, and even contacted Emily's workplace. But by now, Emily and I had a network of support, friends, relatives, and professionals who understood the pattern of abuse and manipulation. Then, one quiet morning, Emily came to me with a small smile. "I think she's finally realizing she's losing," she said. "Every time she tries to act, it backfires." And she was right. Mom's power was fading because we refused to feed it, because we had documented everything, because we had boundaries and allies. For the first time, we weren't reacting. We were controlling the narrative. By the end of the second month, the house was finally quiet. Emily was living safely. Mom was limited in her contact, and I felt a strange sense of relief and pride. We had survived the storm, and more than that, we had grown stronger. The chaos, the manipulation, and the emotional warfare had tested us, but it had also revealed resilience we didn't fully know existed. Looking back, I understood something crucial. Mom's attempts at control could have broken us, but instead, they forged a bond between Emily and me stronger than ever. For the first time, we weren't just siblings surviving a manipulative parent. We were allies, strategists, and survivors. And as I watched Emily laugh for the first time in weeks, the tension easing from her shoulders, I realized that the real victory wasn't in the house, the possessions, or even the legal wins. It was reclaiming our lives and our peace. Mom's power was gone, and with it, the fear that had haunted us for years. Just when we thought the worst was over, Mom pulled one final stunt, one that almost felt cinematic in its audacity. She somehow obtained Emily's new address and showed up with a moving van, a small entourage, and a list of demands that seemed to come straight out of a manipulator's handbook. "I'm here to help her settle in," Mom announced loudly, as if we were supposed to believe that hauling boxes into the apartment was an act of kindness rather than intimidation. Emily's face turned pale, but she squared her shoulders. "Mom, you are not helping. You are harassing me. Please leave." Mom blinked, incredulous. "Harassing? I'm just trying to guide my daughter." I stepped forward. "Guiding doesn't include breaking the law," I said calmly. "If you don't leave now, the police will be called." And we did. Within minutes, officers arrived and assessed the situation. Mom tried to argue, tried to charm, even tried to guilt-trip the officers with tears, but the law was clear. She had no right to enter Emily's property, no claim over her possessions, and no legal standing to coerce or intimidate. The officers escorted her and the moving van away, and for the first time, we felt the victory that came from standing firm. After the confrontation, Emily sank onto her couch, exhausted. "I can't believe she actually did that," she whispered. "She's relentless." I sat beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Yeah," I admitted, "but you held your ground. You stayed calm. That's what made the difference." The next few days were filled with quiet recovery. Emily unpacked her things, carefully arranging her new apartment into a space that was entirely hers. No one to judge, no one to manipulate, just her. She hung pictures on the walls that reminded her of happy moments, her friends, her favorite memories, and even some goofy photos from childhood. For the first time in weeks, she smiled without restraint. Then came the emails, Mom's last desperate attempt at psychological warfare. She wrote long, rambling messages accusing Emily of being selfish, ungrateful, and unloving. Each sentence dripped with blame, as if flipping the narrative could somehow undo her loss of control. We didn't respond. We archived them, kept them for evidence, and focused on moving forward. Emily began reaching out to friends and colleagues, explaining the situation without shame, reclaiming her social narrative. narrative. Surprisingly, many people were shocked but supportive. Friends shared stories of similar experiences, validating her feelings and offering solidarity. Slowly, Emily started to rebuild her social circle, untangling herself from the web of fear her mother had spun. One afternoon, a small package arrived at Emily's door. Inside was a journal, a blank notebook with a note. Start fresh, create your own life. No signature, no explanation, just a simple message. Emily laughed softly, a mixture of relief and disbelief. Maybe it's a sign, she said. Time to write my own story. Weeks passed, and the tension gradually eased. Mom's calls became less frequent, her attempts at manipulation increasingly transparent and ineffective. She began to lose her grip, not because we wanted revenge, but because we refused to give her the power. Boundaries, evidence, calm persistence. They worked better than any argument. Then came the final twist, a public confrontation neither of us expected. Mom tried posting about the family betrayal on social media, twisting the narrative to make herself appear wronged. Friends and distant relatives commented, and some initially supported her. But Emily, empowered now and prepared, responded with clarity, truth, and grace. Screenshots, timelines, and facts dismantled Mom's narrative completely. The online audience, curious and engaged, watched the drama unfold and sided with Emily. Watching her navigate this, confident and assertive, was surreal. The sister, who had cowered under Mom's shadow for years, now stood tall, commanding attention, respect, and authority. I felt proud of her strength, her resilience, and her refusal to be intimidated. One evening, as we recounted the events, Emily said something that stopped me. "Do you realize," she began softly, "that I don't even fear her anymore?" I nodded, understanding completely. The fear that had dominated her life and ours had been stripped away. What remained was clarity, independence, and an unshakable bond between us. Mom had tried everything: legal threats, manipulation, intimidation, social pressure, but she couldn't control what we now owned: our peace and our autonomy. We celebrated that night in small ways: a quiet dinner, laughter, and stories about our childhood. Things that had once been tainted by fear, but now reclaimed as our own. For the first time, we could enjoy the home as it was meant to be, a space of comfort, safety, and personal freedom. Even Mom's final desperate acts, sending friends to spy, posting online, attempting to manipulate mutual acquaintances, had no effect. Each attempt only reinforced the lesson: boundaries and self-respect were stronger than manipulation. Every action she took to regain control now served as proof of her diminishing influence. By the end of the month, the saga had quieted. Emily's apartment felt like a sanctuary, a place free of fear. I realized something important. The conflict had been intense, exhausting, and painful, but it had also revealed strength we didn't fully recognize in ourselves. Mom's attempts at control, rather than breaking us, had forged resilience, strategy, and courage. Looking back, I understood the irony. Mom had tried to dominate, intimidate, and manipulate us, but all she had done was teach Emily and me the power of standing firm. We hadn't just survived the storm, we had emerged stronger, smarter, and more united than ever. And in that moment of calm, Emily turned to me and smiled, genuinely. "We did it," she said. "We really did it." I nodded, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to believe it. Yes, we had survived Mom's onslaught. Yes, we had reclaimed our lives. And yes, we were finally free. Even after the chaos had subsided, Mom didn't completely vanish from our lives. Small, subtle attempts at manipulation continued. Occasional cryptic texts, vague social media posts, or casual remarks during family gatherings. But Emily and I were different now. We no longer responded with fear or anger. We responded with clarity, calm, and boundaries. One Sunday, Emily invited me over for coffee. "I've been thinking," she said, stirring her mug slowly, "about everything that happened. I can't change Mom, but I can control how I live my life. That's powerful." I nodded, understanding completely. We had reclaimed our autonomy, and it was liberating. Over the next few weeks, Emily began to rebuild her life in earnest. She enrolled in classes she had postponed for years, started new hobbies, and even reconnected with friends she had distanced herself from under Mom's influence. Each small victory was a reminder that freedom and independence were possible, even after years of control. Mom tried a few final tricks. She sent letters disguised as advice, called friends claiming we were exaggerating, and even attempted to influence local community members to take her side. But by now, Her efforts were transparent. Everyone could see that Emily's independence wasn't a rebellion, it was survival, and gradually, even her closest allies stopped responding. One afternoon, a package arrived at Emily's door. Inside was a photo album, carefully curated, filled with memories of happier times. There was no note, no explanation, just the album. Emily flipped through it silently, a mix of nostalgia and sadness washing over her. "Maybe she's trying to remind us of the good moments," she said softly. "Or maybe she's realizing she can't control us anymore." I smiled, realizing that it didn't matter. The power dynamic had shifted irreversibly. Mom could send photos, letters, or post online. She couldn't take back our autonomy, our confidence, or our sense of self-worth. That was ours, permanently. Emily even started documenting her own journey publicly, not to expose Mom, but to inspire others who might be dealing with controlling family members. She shared tips on setting boundaries, reclaiming independence, and coping with emotional manipulation. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support, shared stories, and gratitude poured in. For the first time, Emily's experience became a source of empowerment, not just for herself, but for countless others. Then came the day when we finally had closure. Mom called one last time, her tone unusually quiet, almost hesitant. "I just want to make peace," she said. Emily listened calmly, then replied, "Peace is not about control or manipulation. I've found my peace by reclaiming my life. That's where I stand." There was silence on the other end. Mom's last attempt at persuasion had failed. She didn't yell, argue, or manipulate. She simply hung up. That moment, small as it seemed, marked the true end of the ordeal. Emily and I celebrated quietly that evening, reflecting on the months of chaos and the lessons learned. She had not only survived her mother's attempts to dominate her life, but had emerged stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. I too felt a sense of triumph, not over Mom, but over the fear and helplessness we had carried for so long. The house, once a stage for manipulation and control, had become a symbol of resilience. Empty rooms now held the promise of new beginnings. The memories of confrontation were still there, but they no longer carried the same weight. We had transformed the space from a battlefield into a sanctuary, a place where we could thrive without fear. Even Mom's occasional social media posts became less frequent, less charged. It was as if she had realized that no amount of messaging, posts, or letters could regain the control she had once wielded. The realization was liberating, not just for us, but for her as well. In a strange way, we had broken the cycle of fear, and in doing so, allowed everyone to breathe. Emily's life stabilized. She found a new rhythm: work, friends, hobbies, and self-care. I watched her grow into her independence, proud of every small victory, every decision she made without fear or guilt. She was no longer the frightened sister who had called me that first night. She was a woman fully in control of her own life, empowered and resilient. And as for me, I learned something essential too. Family doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes it means navigating storms, protecting the people you love, and standing firm when others try to dominate. I had seen my sister rise from fear, reclaim her life, and assert her boundaries. That was a victory worth more than any confrontation, any argument, or any piece of property. Looking back, the months of struggle, fear, and confrontation were brutal, but necessary. They revealed the strength we didn't know we had, the bond between siblings that could never be broken, and the power of standing firm against manipulation. Mom's attempts to control us had failed spectacularly, leaving us stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. The final lesson was clear. Life isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about facing it with courage, documenting truth, protecting those you love, and refusing to let fear dictate your choices. Emily and I had done all of that. As we sat together one quiet evening, sipping tea and laughing at small memories of the chaos, I realized something important. The storm had passed, but its lessons would stay with us forever. We had survived the impossible, and in doing so, we had discovered not just freedom, but ourselves. The house was quiet, the doors were locked, and the future stretched wide before us. And for the first time in years, I could say with certainty, we were safe, empowered, and finally at peace. If you've ever felt trapped by someone you love, manipulated by a family member, or powerless in your own home, know this: you are not alone. What happened to Emily could happen to anyone. And yet, her story proves something powerful. Boundaries, courage, and persistence can change everything. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. Are there people holding you back, controlling your choices, or making you doubt your worth? It's time to take a stand. Document, protect, and reclaim your peace. Stand firm. Speak up. Your life, your home, your happiness, those are non-negotiable. We share these stories not just for entertainment, but to inspire, empower, and remind you that strength is possible even in the darkest moments. If Emily family's journey moved you, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life family stories that will shock, inspire, and remind you that standing up for yourself isn't vindictive. It's necessary. Your peace is waiting. Take it.